All right. To the Friday, July 29th, 2022 special edition of Cincinnati Public Schools Policy and Equity Committee. We decided we needed to meet in July, and we're making it just under the wire because we have some very important things we need to put on the agenda, hopefully for our board meeting Monday to get ready for school. So I will let my colleagues introduce themselves, starting over here.
Kareem Moffitt.
And over here.
Dan Boyne.
And over here.
Eve Bolton, board member.
Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel.
Kathy Kramer.
And Kathy Crable keeps the trains on time.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to dive right into our agenda. Again, we have a couple things here that are important to the start of school, so we'll need to hopefully get those moved out of committee to the full board. The first one is not necessarily one of those, but I know it was an issue that I believe Dr. Moffitt had wanted to talk about, and unfortunately, Dr. Moffitt, who never misses meetings at all, couldn't be at the last policy, so we wanted to give time, for a couple of the items that we knew you cared about. So I don't have anything necessarily to bring up for board member compensation policy 0147, but I'll turn it over to Dr. Moffitt and then Ms. Bolton if she has anything.
So this one, I brought this up in the context of mileage traveling back and forth to schools. And so the question was around board approved activities, and not trying to change bylaws. I'm not trying to do any of that. It was a question of what is considered an approved activity from the board, whether it be an assignment or just a school action. So in speaking to council, the suggestion was to call like Ohio School Board Association, which I didn't, or ethics, I think one of the two. That would be something like that. But I didn't have an opportunity to speak with them. So I'm going to kind of table this because I'm not suggesting, I think that all activities that are at schools are considered approved activities. So that's where the discretion was coming in at. So it's not a hill I'm willing to die on, but it was just something. And then another board member, I think board member Jones suggested, hey, how about we have a certain allotment for every board member? And if one board member goes over, then they can request from the other board member. There's $100 a year or whatever the specified amount is. And then if another board member spends $2, then they can request from the others. So that's a suggestion as well. But again, I do want to do a little bit more due diligence and work. And so I'm willing to kind of put this on the burner.
Cool. Ms. Bolton?
Yes, I think it's good to table it. And the only thing I would suggest is it probably does require redoing of the bylaws, which is in the process anyway of doing it as we are beginning to change some of the committee piece. So I think that could go part of that list. I frankly don't want to establish the precedent that everything that's happening in the school is board approved. I don't think that's part of governance. I also I'm much more appreciative of more of the decentralization of that. So we do get reimbursed when we're on assignment, and that usually means we're leaving town, we're going to another conference or what have you. So I think it's good to put it in the bylaw discussion, but I really do have, philosophically have an issue about the board approved, whatever's happening in the school. I think that is probably something that I wouldn't want to see necessarily as a precedent.
Well, just a little slight pushback on that. Okay. Anything that happens within our schools, technically, we don't have to manage them, but we are overseeing all school and all school activities to the point where we have to approve alcohol for like the performing arts. If that weren't the case, then it wouldn't come to a board for approval. So just a slight bit of pushback, but again, it's not a hill that I'm willing to die on. It's just something that has come up because of the amount of travel. I'm going to take it off on my taxes regardless. I'm going to still attend events regardless of if I'm compensated or not. So it's not just, I like it when the littles come by. It's not a deciding factor, but it definitely was significant enough. And I invite all schools to invite us to events. And when they do, and we attend and support, 52 cents a mile is small compensation for that. But again, it's going to happen for me regardless of if I get
Yeah.
it approved or not. But I'm willing to table it so I get time until I get more information. I also like to do a little bit more due diligence on finding out what other districts do, what is a state precedents, if any, and then what are some of the other districts doing. And I've got a call out to Princeton. I've got a call out to some other districts too. So let's just table it and move on.
Cool.
We'll table it, but again, you're not always representing the full board. You are assigned to
Sure.
represent the full board. You are representing individual board members. That's another piece. But yeah, let's talk about it when we get ready to do the
Let's
bylaws.
do it.
I think it's a good topic to have, and I'll just add a quick 2 cents. I think I tend to align probably more with Ms. Bolton's comments. I do think the conversation is warranted. I just think of, like, for example, I'm mentored at Euler before I became a board member, and I've mentored there for 5-6 years or something. And like I don't necessarily feel that I should be reimbursed. I'm personal example, that's all, that I should be reimbursed for driving to Euler, for example. However, I do think the conversation is warranted.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the whole board, at least you referenced Ms. Jones, wanted to as well. So
Sure.
we'll table that one. We're looking at the bylaws. Appreciate you bringing it up, Dr. Moffitt.
Thank you.
Board policy 6231, appropriations and spending plan.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, wait, sorry.
There was one ask, I think, at the last meeting to switch the some language from board policy. Yes.
Yeah.
6231 to 0140. So that relates to the board member service fund, and that's all that's done is we lifted a paragraph out of 62,
Yes,
put it into 0147.
and it's the 0147.2
It
spot
is.
if people want to check it out. Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Hoying, which means we would be recommending this for approval by the full board
Yes.
on Monday, ideally.
It's-
Right?
The new language, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's just moving one paragraph, but
Yeah,
I think
totally.
it definitely makes
That's right.
more sense in
That's
the
right.
bylaws than
Yeah,
That's right.
I think the issue there was that our little trust fund or whatever it is, that it was putting it in the same sort of paragraph as like.
That's right.
the appropriations.
Appropriations.
Right,
Well,
yeah,
this-
right.
Right.
So that's a good one. We don't like to add,
No.
but
No. So yeah, agenda item 1 and 2 are coming. My bad. Thank you, Mr. Hoying.
We'll move both those forward for
Yep,
approval at the next board.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Great.
Thanks.
Awesome. And then 1411, there were some suggestions made, I believe, to whistleblower, but then we also believed we wanted Dr. Moffitt here for the conversation. I think this was also one that we wanted to kind of have in the box, ready to go for the new school year. So,
yes.
Policy 1411, whistleblower protection. Mr. Hoying, you want to give a quick overview about what happened with this since last we met, and then we can chat?
Yes, and I'm glad to bring this up.
Chair, I think part of it was that it was really wishy-washy.
Mhm.
I think it just meant what minimum state standards or something, and we thought this is very important.
Mm-hmm.
That was the background, and then we made some
Mhm.
additional
Yes.
changes since last month.
Mm-hmm.
That is coming up on the screen right now. Okay, so the additional changes that we made that's right. It had previously been written as sort of just word for word the whistleblower, the Ohio whistleblower statute. I think certainly this version still meets the statute, but is a little more plainly worded and a little bit more tailored to Cincinnati Public. The additions we made since last meeting are to add employees. It was requested that we add theft of time as one of the sort of parade of terribles that the employees are protected in reporting. As well, to separate out safety risks and health risks. Health risks, I think we think more of like environmental health risks, water safety, air quality, et cetera, versus safety. I think we think more of, the use of metal detectors, leaving doors unlocked, certainly an appropriate thing to add right. We added, it was requested that we add a specific time within which a CPS official has a duty to respond, or the employee should elevate the concern. I used 7 days. I thought that was appropriate in most circumstances, but glad to have your feedback there. And then finally, again, it was suggested that if the report is about someone who reports to the board, it should be made directly to the board. So if the report is about superintendent, the treasurer, CFO, the general counsel, or the report may be made right to the Board of Education. Glad to answer any questions about that.
I'll turn it over to my colleagues first.
I think it's greatly improved. I still worry about people reporting to the person they report to. And so, but I think you've tried to take care of that, that the obligation to tell that person that did the reporting what they did with it.
That's right.
Is that the 7 days?
It also says reports of any actual or suspected misconduct should be made to the employee's immediate supervisor unless the supervisor is the subject of the report. So if you're reporting on, in which case the report should be made to any other responsible CPS.
And
What does that define that? I just think that that's kind of still a little ambiguous.
I think the idea would be if your custodian concerned about a chemical that was being used, and your immediate supervisor, generally a building engineer in that case, is insisting that you use that, and your concerns haven't been addressed. You can at that point elevate it to, if it's about your supervisor, then you could elevate it to, let's say, the district environmental health and safety manager, Steve Knappich, or the somebody supervising the building engineers. That would be like Sean League. So
I guess my thought is, or my concern rather, is if you elevate it to the supervisor's supervisor, because that would be maybe the next thinking person. What if, I'm just trying to kind of take it almost out of that department if it could potentially cause retaliation for the employee. So is there a system, do we have a system where they can go directly to HR, and then a more objective reporting system where if the problem is your supervisor, maybe you don't feel safe with the supervisor. I'm like, I don't want it to continue to be, I reported it to my supervisor, and then I still had to stay in that environment. Now the supervisor knows. I don't want to create a hostile environment for employees, potentially, because they're reporting on management. I guess that's just my concern.
And I'm glad to make whatever adjustments. I will say that is what this policy protects against. That the paragraph that reads, an employee submitting a report shall be protected from discipline, retaliation, or reprisal from making such report. This is the whistleblower policy. It's not, I think, and at least in my view, it's less about sort of the channel you take as opposed to the board's statement, and it's actually in the law as well,
Sure.
that making a report, on one of these topics, that then entitles you to protection from retaliation.
I understand.
Yeah.
But realistically speaking, this can happen. I know we have a policy for it. I just was trying to see if there was any way that, and I think maybe it just has to be situated. And I'm fine. I think that realistically speaking, in real life, things don't always go nice and orderly like this. And so I'm just putting that out there. Is there, have we thought about, or do we even have a system where it's more objective?
I want to ask a question to you, Dr. Moffitt. So what you're talking about, to me at least, seems that it falls under this any other responsible CPS official. Like, do you think that could be worded differently? Because that's what that says. Like, it doesn't say report it to the supervisor. It says report it to any other responsible CPS official, which could be HR, which could be Dan, which could be you. Do you think that should be worded differently? Because that's
what I was saying was ambiguous. Is that who decides that? Who decides the next level? If you're complaining about your supervisor, a person could say, well, I'm going to go to the board because that's what they inferred from that. That's another I just was saying it's just ambiguous.
Sure.
Again, it doesn't matter to me. We can leave it the way it is. I just wanted to bring it up that if we don't define it and we leave it for people to define, then we can't, they should have no problems with their definition of the next level. And that's all. Because the next level to me might be I'm going to the superintendent.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
But I've skipped people in between there. We can.
Yeah, this says you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's leave it like that.
Yeah.
Does it say that? They can
I mean,
skip a level?
it
It
says
doesn't say that they can.
any other responsible CPS official. I mean, that to me, somebody can make the case, say they send it to me, for example, and then I immediately forward it to somebody who needs to know about it, which is not me, but they could easily, I'm any other responsible CPS official, right?
That's all I was saying is to me, we need to outline that process
Mhm.
and then hold accountability in the process rather than just leave it ambiguous to say, take it to the next person if you feel like it's somebody next. But if that's not been our precedence and you don't think that that's necessary, then it's fine. I'm just saying it's ambiguous to me. But until it comes up, then maybe it's just.
If I may, one more thing, then
Sure.
I'll be done. I mean, if I may, I personally, and I think professionally, think the ambiguity of it is part of the strength. Like you can interpret that how you want,
Mhm.
and go to somebody that you think is trustworthy. I've had people, get a hold of me with stuff that I certainly do not need to be involved in, and I end up asking like, "Hey, are you comfortable with me sharing this with Dan or the superintendent?" Which is usually the two. And if they say no, I'm like, "Well, then I can't really help you." And then they say yes, I'm like, "Great," and then good luck, guys. But anyway, I think the ambiguity is makes it a little stronger, to be honest. But that's just me. I understand why you're not comfortable with it.
Well, I like it, but I know of a situation where he was saying that they were retaliated against because of it. And so that's why I'm wanting the policy to be strong enough that we don't have, no one can complain about it. It's just, but again, it is, I'm going to say this one more time for the people in the cheat sheet, is not something I want to die on. It's just, it may be situational where, hey, this person is just this particular situation, but they went to a board member and were chastised for going to a board member because they interpreted the policy to mean another person. And so I just wanted to make it clear that the policy says that, and that's up for inference based on the person. So we can't chastise people because they choose to go to a board member and skip steps.
But we can, because we've now got the communication policy piece that kind of says similarly that employees don't necessarily communicate with board members, or at least I think that's the implication. And I also would assume that under new leadership too, that's going to be a larger problem, at least for a while. So I think you're right to worry about it. I think we talked briefly about somehow, and we didn't want to give her this work, but somehow even mentioning or a reference to the internal auditor or some other person or something, because I think we need to pass this. And I think this whistleblower piece needs to also be in the employee handbook, not just board policy. I think it should be a part of the handbook. In a big organization like ours, and we have varying levels of roles and responsibilities and competencies. I think if we could make that reference, I think that helps. Maybe at the internal auditor piece, because that's the person that's also not just supposed to be seeing if we're auditing things right, or the treasurer uses her in some way, shape, or form. She's supposed to be watching out for this kind of stuff too. So, but I do think that it does need to be in the handbook.
Well, I think it needs to not only be in the handbook, but to your point, then this is a conflict with the communication policy that we are having to deal with, because this says very clearly they can come to anybody and an employee will not be retaliated against. So we need to have this conversation then with everyone underneath us.
You would almost have to exclude board members from this, that it would have to be somebody within the administration that they'd have to go to, rather than board members, in order to be consistent. And,
Well, no.
well, yeah, I mean,
mean-
if we're being told we're not supposed to, people aren't supposed to be talking to us, and that's whether that's policy or whether that's being stated. And I'm not looking for the business, frankly, but I do think there is a conflict. I agree. I'm agreeing with you on this one, for sure, that there needs to be better clarity.
Yeah, putting aside that last point for a second, because you could
Sure.
you could change official to administrator, any CPS administrator, if that's better. But without changing that language, you could also provide some examples, to your point, of knowing who to any other responsible CPS official or administrator,
i.e.
including, or including but not limited to, or such as the internal auditor, the general counsel, director of human resources. I think those are three people who, between those three, this falls within their responsibility as well, I think, to receive reports from employees that they may have concerns.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I like those three being pointed out, and I don't want the whistleblower thing to necessarily encourage staff to come to board members, as I think they will get in trouble.
Well,
So
since
they will anyway.
Since
but-
I'm bringing this
Yeah.
up and I'm complaining about it, I guess I'll say this. I wasn't trying to exclude board members, because I think when you're talking about a whistleblower policy, the person needs to go where they feel most comfortable. And they're clearly complaining about something, so they need to go where they feel most comfortable. And I wouldn't want to take anyone that they feel comfortable out or steer them towards something that may not be comfortable for them. I think that the issue is that this policy as written is fine. It just needs to be clarified on our end that this is what the policy is. Period. So I'm not saying, I don't want to put examples in there. I was just saying, if we're not going to do it, we're not going to do it. That's fine. But people can come to whomever they want to, and that's how we've had it written, and that is how it should be. So that's my 2 cents on it. Again, it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. We can definitely submit it the way that it's written, and then if we need to clarify in full board, then we can clarify. But I'm not expecting, I'm going to go on record and say, I'm not expecting any retaliation to any employee who does this to go to a board, if they go to a board member.
So, if I may, so we can move ahead. I think this would maybe cover both bases. It seems to me that perhaps the communications policy is the one that then needs to be amended, i.e., and this could go one of two ways, I think. Actually, I think I just lied. I think there's two options, and they're both at odds with one another, maybe. But the communications one could clearly say, here's the chain of communication and the way it should go, unless an employee is sort of activating policy 1411, whatever. Or, I think Ms. Bolton, and that's what I was thinking of the whole time. Again, these are at odds with each other. Adding IE at the end of this. But if we take the board member out of it, and quite frankly, I think, people get a hold of me too, but I'm like Ms. Bolton, I'm not looking to be a repository for whistleblower stuff, and it doesn't happen often, that's for certain. Sure. But at the same time, I think I am more amenable, after thinking about this and listening to everybody talk, I would be more amenable to affecting the communications policy. I'm sorry, this policy, and adding IE, or just changing it to administration. I actually think that's the easiest fix, to be honest. That would be my preference.
I do like the three that are mentioned, administration or such
yes.
as those three. Because again, if somebody now, we're working in different situations.
Yeah.
Now, even part of the rework we've done on, I don't think it's finished, as to what we're supposed to be doing. Our bylaws and everything say we have to, whatever we find out, we obviously refer to the superintendent. So that's been long held. So I just think that, I think if you put those three in administration, and I do think we have to review the communication piece.
Well, and also the one thing that's covered in this policy
No
too
retaliation.
is of course the piece about if it is the superintendent, then it comes to the board and that nullifies the communications plan.
Yes.
Policy, obviously. So I'm comfortable with that recommendation. I know that you were just said that you weren't really that keen on adding like those examples. So
Well, again, I just think that the addition of those examples would lend itself to mean that there is a procedure in taking one of those steps. I don't think we have a procedure in place. Like, what's the procedure if you go to HR? What's the procedure if you go to?
Well, they write
So
that.
because I don't think we have those procedures in place, I wouldn't put them there. Because the type of mind I am is I'm like, okay, well, they said IE HR, IE administration. I'm looking for a procedure for those three. So I think it's fine to be the way that it is, particularly now, because we also need to visit the communications. Once we have tightened our end on the communications policy, we will have outlined a procedure that would be necessary to follow so that we can put those examples in here. Because if they take this route of HR, then this is going to follow.
that doesn't belong in the policy though.
The communications policy?
No, none of the procedures. The
Right,
procedures
right.
don't belong in. I mean, they have their own procedures. I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to be a part of that.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I just don't think it's clear. I think that it's unclear, and we're trying to add a little bit of clarity to something that I think is fine the way it is, but we need to tighten the retaliation piece because we know specifically that there's something that we're being asked. I think it's a little unfair because we're having this conversation knowing that there are things that we're being asked that people don't know what we're being asked for with regard to communication. And that's what I meant. But also, I don't expect any retaliation as this is written with the changes or this to any employee that goes to a board member because they feel safe that way. It has been our procedure to always deal with directing that back to the superintendent. I think it's an issue of accountability at that point rather than micromanagement.
If I could, on the whistleblower, I would really strongly suggest that we add those three that Dan suggested because there is an assumption when if you just say only administration, well, first of all, their supervisor, forget that because you're going to almost guarantee retaliation if, or to fight against it. But the general counsel and internal auditor and so on, there is an HR, there's an assumption by employees that they have an extra duty to the bureaucracy rather than being a supervisor of other people, that they're supposed to be the ones watching. By the way, you're supposed to be the ones watching for good stuff happening and to make sure bad stuff doesn't happen. So I do like those three added. And I do think we're going to have some sort of come to Jesus meeting about the communication piece.
I agree.
Okay, well, let's do it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But let's pass this thing now, and if we can.
Okay.
Let's pass this with the three examples, Dan, that you referenced.
Yep.
We'll pass
I
this
think
forward
that was
Monday.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have a come to Jesus. I think that's right.
And I couldn't agree with you more, Kareem, about things that happen.
Yeah, totally.
We've just lived through it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to protect us. That's all.
No.
I love
go for
it. All right. In keeping sort of with the theme, let's see, 4210 employee ethics. Dan,
Speaking of,
do you have an update on this from last time?
I do. We, again, updated this policy, and I have...
Oh, thermostat.
Yeah. Thanks,
Are
man.
you cold?
Come here. All right, sorry, Dan.
Yeah, no problem. We updated this policy almost completely as well. Again, tailoring it, I think, to specifically to CPS and some of the ethical issues that we encounter here. The updates from last meeting are highlighted. It was requested to add a hyperlink to the licensure code of professional conduct for Ohio educators, which we've done. It was requested to add in addition to the other ethical considerations that it was important to CPS, this board, to preserve academic honesty and fairly evaluate students, and specifically with the administration of test assessments. It was requested to expand, the protection not just of school property but of district property, and adding utilizing district technology appropriately and for school and district. Those changes. I'm glad to answer any questions.
I love it. Bolton, Dr. Moffitt?
I appreciate the additions.
I know you were here for the discussion. I see your comments, my comment about the computers, and all yours reflected. So, Dr. Moffitt?
Yeah, you guys represented it.
Cool. So we move this one forward for Monday.
Yes.
We'll move those forward.
Awesome.
Yay.
And thank you, Ms. Bruckner, for watching from afar and helping us get all this on the agenda for Monday. So everyone say hi to Ms. Bruckner. She's in the office watching us, transcribing.
Hello, everybody. I have a quick question.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Are you saying you want these to go forward for Monday, August 1st or Monday, August 15th, which will do the same thing because it'll be before the start of the board or the school year?
I was thinking Monday, August 1st this whole time, but I'm going to look to my teammates. And you were thinking,
I know we're not allowed to revise or add or whatever, again, in the new world we're living in. But I think the August 1st is better for communication rather than the week of the 2 days before school starts.
Yeah. So that would be Monday, August 1st, Ms. Bruckner.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay.
We'll help.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thanks y'all so much.
Get to it.
We got
No, really appreciate it. We weren't even.
It's actually Dan doing it.
Yeah.
The public is like, what? What is all this aggressive?
Oh, speaking of which, policy
for it.
5517.01, prohibition on harassment, intimidation.
I love it.
That's
That's why
nice.
you guys wanted me to come back.
That's
This is
right, yeah,
like-
nice
This
tee up.
is, okay, this is your baby. Let's do this one.
Yeah,
This
this
is
was
This is you,
this was
babe.
one of the ones that you wanted, and so we shelved it. Well, wait.
There's a couple.
Yeah, well, that's correct, because it was the prohibition on harassment, intimidation, and bullying, social media for district employees. So, Dan, you
And the
want
student
to
one.
remind us, and then the student one, which is new, which would be new. Bullying?
Mm-mm.
No, there's no red line at all.
Oh, okay, we were just talking about
I
it.
think it was a discussion piece.
Okay.
Yep.
But we have no changes or recommended changes. In talking to you, I thought it was more related to the implementation, but I could be wrong.
I think it was, and I thought we had a
That's right.
conversation. We had the discipline manager, the
Wayne
discipline
Lane.
here. Yeah.
Carrie Bunger and
No,
Wayne.
it was
Wayne,
Wayne.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he was going to give us some data, actual reports of bullying.
So Wayne was here to discuss social media because remember he talked about how many of our discipline
Yes.
incidents were related or
Right.
somehow.
With
And,
regard to social media.
yep, and we've got actually next on the agenda, Stephanie has put together a draft social media policy for students, which is the thing you asked for.
Yeah.
Something for us to look
Excellent.
at.
Let's
It's
do that.
kind of first of
Yeah.
its kind. Yeah.
Okay, you look at us being trendsetters.
right.
Look, that's what we did
Okay,
in
so for
policy.
this
That and
one,
get in trouble.
so for this one, for the
Scheduled for more.
harassment, intimidation, and bullying, to be honest with you, I can't remember. That was May. I'm having a hard time
Well,
with last week,
let's
let
do
alone
it.
2 months
Yeah,
ago.
it was probably May. Yeah, that's
Let's
right.
Yeah,
do
was
it.
May. I don't remember it, but I will. I mean, I
If you're
reserve
good,
the right
we're-
to table it so we can come back to it.
We're
if
good.
it comes back up
No,
again.
I don't
remember.
want
It's
to table.
it's worth looking at every year.
Well,
So
we
you know
don't have to
we've
table it.
Social media.
Oh,
The-
which one are we
the
tabling?
harassment.
The harassment, because there was no change, there was
was
nothing on.
We were just talking.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dr. Mova just wanted to talk about it and said we
Okay.
could get to move on. So it's the next two though we need to talk about.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're not shelving 9125.
No. No.
Okay.
Let's move to that.
yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so we're good. Yeah, I know.
Go for it.
So Stephanie's got these two. This is on
Cool.
social media for district employees and students.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as you already alluded, we had the conversation, I guess it was the May meeting in regards to the regularly or the consistency, a lot of the discipline issues where there was interaction with social media, but we didn't have a specific district policy.
Mhm.
So we were in some ways taking those on a case by case basis. So I think, and I guess a part of that, the 9125, the social media for district employees just kind of entered into that conversation. So I think that policy was more robust than what we didn't have anything for students. So we had a couple of edits for the 9125, which was just making it more up to date because it hadn't been revised in a while. So we added the word apps under what is social media, and then we also updated the specific social media tools that CPS uses for social media. But the substantive change we made was the addition of this new policy specifically for students, which we're, I guess, technically proposing it to be 9126. And so this was, like I said, in response to the presentation that was made in May, but then also the recent Supreme Court ruling in the cheerleading case where the Supreme Court ruled that there wasn't enough substantial disruption for the school board to have disciplined the student. And so basically what we've attempted to do with the student media or student social media policy is to kind of identify what we would consider substantial disruption. So then that way it would give us the ability to to discipline as needed in conjunction with other kind of activity at school. Because what we were finding is a lot of kind of off-campus social media activity was still substantially interfering with what was going on in the school building. And so we've tried to address those individually, but talks about privacy, acting ethically online, not sharing confidential information, giving some examples of how information is shared on social media that can be considered cyberbullying. Of course, some of the things that should be explicit, but they're not, but just the sharing, like the sexting, and then anything that will be considered kind of criminal. And so we've really just tried to spell that out and have it kind of match up with our student code of conduct too. So the language kind of mirrors that, but that's pretty much.
So we're trying to, can you take me here quickly? I'm so excited about it, but we're trying to quantify disruption, right? Is that what we're kind of doing?
Or define it, you know, or really, we're almost really trying to put students on notice. I think there was kind of this gray area that when students were being disciplined, or if there was some social media involved in kind of whatever disruption was going on, it wasn't clearly stated what could happen. And I think a lot of students were relying on the fact that they were doing this technically outside of school walls. And so we're basically trying to put students on notice that those things are taken into consideration, and this is how they will be taken into consideration. So in some ways, they won't have that kind of soft defense anymore. And I think that was kind of Wayne's kind of struggle. Sometimes he would get these instances, and he was even on a case-by-case basis trying to determine, you know, how much it should be considered when we were kind of, you know, delving out discipline and things of that nature. So.
And I know he shared that a lot of times there's an incident, and then as he peels back layers, he finds out that, okay, it really started on social media.
Yes.
And so what is defined as disruption? It says substantial disruption to the
school.
Those
are kind of the enumerated points. Is pretty much how we've tried to pull that out. So we're talking about respect the privacy of others. So using good judgment when they're sharing. A lot of students may share photographs and videos, but a lot of times there's other students, you know, in those photographs and videos. So again, it's kind of taking that into consideration when you're sharing these things. Just because it may be your property, it does still impact other students. If they're in the background, you know, we have instances where students kind of record things and then they post it. So it still might be something that happened off campus. And then another student may post it, but then that might cause, you know, some type of, you know, disruption still again in the school. It may, you know, create, you know, increase some type of beef or something that's going on. So that's what we were trying to identify there.
So if they do any of these things, that is considered a substantial. I'm thinking like a kid to say, well, I just made a video of myself for 30 seconds. How is that a substantial disruption? I'm thinking like a kid, thinking like a parent of a kid that would say that. So how are we able to give teeth to this so that principals, teachers have the ability to discipline when there are violations?
If I can jump in, I think what you said earlier is really on point, which is the Supreme Court generally is now saying that schools can't get involved. You know, they're trying to figure out, you know, what's the nexus, the connection between a student's social media activity and a school's jurisdiction. You know, it doesn't happen often on a school device. Let's say it doesn't happen during school hours, but it can be really disruptive to the school. And so they say that, you know, the Supreme Court kind of just generally says, in order for the school to be involved, it's got to be a substantial disruption. Step two is, I think this policy would be the board's statement of, okay, well, within Cincinnati Public Schools, these would be substantially disruptive to our schools. You know, depicting firearms, violating someone's privacy, bullying or threatening. And then that's board policy, but we generally don't set, I don't think, like the code of conduct necessarily just in board policy. So I think what the policy would do is then inform sort of as we revise and revisit. There's many examples of how social media can result in discipline already in our code of conduct. But I think we would take this and then again look at our code of conduct again this year and say, you know, now that the board has made a statement about what constitutes a substantial disruption, how can we revise and refine our code of conduct, which is really where a student is informed about what's okay and what's.
Okay.
I don't know that many. All respect, I'm not sure that many students are checking out the board policies to find out, but they are. But I think the code of conduct does speak to that. Yeah.
But these students are very savvy.
Does,
These
does
students,
speak to that.
yeah,
For sure.
they've got super savvy,
And
so this helps us.
This, I just want to be able, thank you for, because this is, I like it when we're trend setting
Right.
in the state and in the city, the state and the nation, but also it just gives a framework so that principals have the ability to be able to exercise some sense of accountability to students. And I think that's what has been missing. I just wonder if we can add to 9125, because I see it says social media is defined by board policy 9125. It says apps, and I love that. My question is, does that include the Google Chat? Is that what we're saying? Google Chat, which we as a district are utilizing?
It says various online website apps and tools. So we took tools to be very general. We wanted to specifically add in apps because that's just newer terminology
Sure.
that has come about since this policy was even probably created. So,
Can
but I
we
think Google Chat would be in there. But I mean,
Well, I don't know if we needed to name it. That's why I was asking you. It was the thought to include under apps Google Chat, because we've had parents that have asked specifically at one school, can the Google Chat be disabled because that is a vehicle for bullying. But then also, can we just add under Cincinnati Public Schools uses several social media tools, including, can we just say, but not limited to, and then it would be inclusive of
yeah,
anything else that comes out
Mhm.
that we don't know about. It might be Snap Google tomorrow,
Right.
You know, but it includes, I would even add Snapchat because that's where a lot of these problems are coming from.
Well, here I think it attempted to define what CPS as a district uses as far as even just our outreach and where we have a presence.
Sure.
So that's what this was more so specifically referring to. But as far as what students use,
Well,
I mean,
I think that we're seeing a lot of, and that's not to say next year we won't be on Snapchat. You know, I'm just saying I want to
and I think that's a good addition.
not limited to,
Mhm.
but then also if you are naming them, you know, Google Chat is something that we do use, and then Snapchat is one also that we may be going to, but just if we say not limited to, I think that helps.
So do we want to or not want to add the Google Chat?
Sure.
For some reason, I thought that was taken away, but that might have been temporary.
I do think it was disabled for summer scholars.
Mhm.
It was for summer, but the complaint during the school year from Fairview
Yeah,
parents was
yeah.
that, hey, it's automatically on by default. Can we have it taken off by default? And then we have to request it for it to be on because we've got parents who don't want their kids to have Google Chat, but it's already on.
I think the plan was to continue to
To
have
not
it
have it.
disabled, but
Okay.
we can double check on that.
Well, even if they have it disabled, but some people have it enabled, let's just put it there because
For sure.
it comes by default.
Yep.
Yeah.
I ask a couple of questions about it. First of all, I think, as much as we're going to put this on August 1st, since people aren't going to see it in time and some people are concerned about not seeing things early enough, there might be some pushback there. But I would really like to be able to even forward this so that it can be discussed too by the board. And then maybe all of these officially get passed in August the 15th, like Pat was suggesting. But I think this needs to be in place before school starts, just as much as anything else does. Can I ask a couple of questions? Are we strong enough as it pertains to after school activities? Do we reference that enough in this? And then also I'm concerned, just if we are doing the racism piece and also gender piece, are we referencing those enough? Because that seems to be where a lot of the problem is.
I think in respect to the after-school activities, because most of those are taking place within the building.
Mhm.
So I think that's addressed in the very last
Or any
paragraph.
place where school
School
activities
activities take place.
and that means on the bus, that means on somebody else's playing field.
I know it says at school, on school premises, or at school-related activities.
Mhm.
But we can make it more.
So that children would understand that.
Yeah.
Little teenagers.
Wouldn't the clarification though come in the code of conduct and not in the policy? Policy saying school activities is broad enough, but the code of conduct, I would think, is where it could be defined as games, activities.
However anybody wants to add it, and also the to and from school. The to and from school is a disaster from a standpoint of both the kids that walk and the kids that stand at the bus stop and the kids that are on the bus, be it yellow or pink. But I think this is great. But I do worry about the race piece and the gender piece. But definitely to and from school. And if you think that other language takes care of after-school activities, that's fine.
I think in general, what this does is, I think it was pretty much already explicit that if it was on school premises or in school, that I feel like our current policies kind of address that. So really, this whole policy in general is pretty much saying, now this catches everything else. If you're doing it on social media and it's affecting school.
Well, if you feel that's covered, then that's fine.
Okay.
But do add to and from school.
Yes, okay.
Because we're responsible for them then too, and they don't know that.
Yes.
No, and this does such a good job of sort of elucidating what they also don't know, particularly the final paragraph,
Yes.
that adding something like that I think is probably sound. In which case, then we would want this on the agenda for some kind of first reading on Monday, so
Yes.
people have it, and then 15th we'll ask people to take action. I think that's fair, and then they'll have enough time to look, because it's brand new, right?
Yes.
Does that work for you,
Yes.
Dr. Marlowe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Absolutely.
cool. All right. Nice work. Thank you, Ms. Scott. Nice work. We are just. All right, and now number 8 is this was I believe Ms. Bolton, right? The official definitions of equity published by and passed by board action.
Yes, and if we want to hold that for when we or whatever, that can almost be. Did you want to do the grooming thing first?
The dressing
Is it
room.
something that we have to.
Well,
I have feelings about. Because that's going to be another thing in the new world we're living in.
the dress and grooming.
Let's pass it while we can.
How you doing?
Okay.
Let's do it. 3216.
Yes.
Dress and grooming.
I'll bring it up. I have no recommended changes, but I welcome your feedback. And the reason I think we laugh is it's a fraught area. It's a fraught area with respect to employees' First Amendment rights.
Yep.
There have been, as you probably are aware, cases, especially with respect to things like political buttons or statements. And in general, First Amendment wise, the board has an ability to regulate free speech of teachers in the classroom so long as it's related to a legitimate pedagogical reason. It's a pretty broad and ambiguous term, but there have been cases on that. It's also obviously, or maybe not obviously, but in general, condition of employment that has collective bargaining implications. The unions have an interest, obviously, in this policy as well, and we've had discussions or robust discussions sometimes about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate professional attire. In general, the reason I don't have any recommendations for you is this has been a policy that, there's some sort of a peace accord on. This is what's in the employee handbook. The union has been willing to support us with this policy. There is some vagueness and ambiguity, but at times that's been helpful to us, at times it's not. So I don't have any recommended changes, but I cautiously welcome your comments.
I don't have it. I'm good. Ms. Bolton or Dr. Moffitt?
Boy, when I miss a meeting, I miss it. I'm like, what in the world are we doing? I guess I'm a little confused. Can I get a little background? Why this had to come up?
I'm not sure. Is it in the sequence?
It's in the sequence.
I tried to avoid it as long as I could, friend.
For at least 3 years, we've
That's
avoided
right.
this. My suggestion is to take general counsel and keep it as it is, and blame him. I think playing with it is too much, but I do think this is going to be an issue this year. So it's something that the superintendent can deal with the unions about, but this is the policy if the board thinks it's cool. I mean, we shouldn't be in that business anyway.
I think this is fine.
I can tell you from our experience where this has been a very successful use of ILTs because within a school community, there have been circumstances where a principal says, look, I'd like to see, notwithstanding kind of the board's policy, I'd like to see us dress more professional. And that principal often is able to kind of rally some support within the ILT, and they'll have a school dress code that goes a little further. Westwood, as you know, the students wear ties. And so staff members generally, I think, have worn ties at Westwood. So it's just an example, where at times the ILT has really been an effective sort of representative of the school. And so I don't know, that's one area where that we've used the ILT very effectively, I think.
I'm a little concerned about D just turns me. And I'm gonna just, I'll just bring that elephant up in the room. I think that
No, bring it up now.
it just leads. I think this whole entire policy, but specifically D, to me, lends itself to, it's ambiguous and it lends itself to an inference that could be considered discriminatory. Give you an example, may not be the best, but one on the top of my head. Someone may think, okay, a person who wears dreadlocks, that they may think, well, they're not groomed. And to that person, they are groomed. So how do you get to define what grooming is to me? I think that this opens up the door for that. And again, I'm kind of like, why are we talking about this right now? Because I don't know. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. It gives me the. I think we're going to have. I think we stand because we're leaving it to the person to infer what the definitions are, and it's not clearly defined. Nor do I think it should be. But I'm just saying. I'm giving you that example of dreadlocks. I've heard people say. And I'm not necessarily speaking culturally, but I've heard people say, well, they don't look clean. Okay. What is clean to you? So that's just one example. I mean, if you're talking about not making a political statement, not wearing Make America Great stuff, that is completely different than a grooming policy. So, I've said it on record. I think that this dress in a manner consistent with their professional responsibilities. What does that mean to you? Might mean something different to me. But if I stand to be chastised because of that, then we better clearly define it. So, again, just my personal opinion. I be physically clean, neat, and well groomed. What does that? Someone may think having a beard is not groomed. Someone may think grooming means no facial hair. Again, I have a problem with that. I just said it.
The response I'd have on that is, again, dress in a manner consistent with their professional responsibility. I think there's a difference between what might be appropriate attire for gym teacher, a physical education teacher. It might be okay to wear, some athletic clothes because you're involved with, the students in an athletic way, as opposed to a chemistry teacher or a history teacher, a literature teacher. That's what comes to mind for me when I hear it consistent with your professional responsibility. It's well received. I certainly hear you on the possibility that a policy like this is discriminatory. I think it is generally not the principals acting alone in this regard. I mean, they are consulting with us. They are consulting with HR. I think we do not have that history or reputation. We haven't been accused of that, I don't think. We're conscious of it, so I hear you. Again, I don't recommend changes, not necessarily because I think it's a perfect policy, but it has been a policy that we've been able to enforce where needed, and that it's been peaceful with the union for now.
I said it.
I think one of the things, I think it's points well taken. I think we did mention that a significant portion of our working staff wears uniforms.
That's right.
And I don't know if we want to make that reference in here, that there is an expectation that if they do have a uniform, they're supposed to be wearing the uniform.
Isn't that building by building? I'm just asking.
It's pretty much district-wide, I think.
Talking
Like security guards
have a uniform.
They have a uniform.
The plant operators.
Would you put that under? How would you add that to this policy if there was a uniform required wear it? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah,
Okay.
something along those lines.
Do we have that under any other base?
No.
Do we have to say that in any other?
There may be references to uniforms in the collective bargaining. I'm glad to just acknowledge that we have uniforms for some positions.
I think that's important. I mean, even from a security standpoint, and strangers in the building or what have you, I think, that half the people that are there are in the right. I just think it makes sense. I didn't know the professional responsibilities and that, since we've now merged, I think professional, didn't we? I know we got rid of professional employees at the top because we're merging all of that. I don't know if a professional their professional responsibilities.
Job responsibility.
Yeah. Because that can be a little bit more generic.
Sure.
I hesitate to say it about the school by school, but this is open-ended enough that it could be school. It has been kind of school
It has
by
been
school.
sometimes, and there's some schools that it brings out some of the character of it.
Absolutely.
Any other comments on this one? Do we want to move this forward with the addition of uniforms?
And job responsibilities.
And we don't. I mean, do we want to do this again? I'm open. I'm not married to this one at all. August 1st or 15th. Does anyone care?
I would hope we do it the first. Because
All right.
Let's do this.
Yes, all right. Well, then we'll do it on the 1st.
I had one suggestion
Oh,
I was going
yeah.
to make was, I don't
Do
know
it.
if we, in response to what Dr. Moffitt was saying about sometimes some of the cultural differences.
Mhm.
I know that recently the Crown Act was passed. I don't know if there's something we want to
Oh,
maybe
that's a good
refer
point.
to that, or just say, this shouldn't be implemented in a discriminatory manner. And then that covers us if we feel like it is being done in that way.
We'll do.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely.
So we have other business, some new stuff, community learning centers, 7,500. Any comments from council now, or is that Ms. Bolton?
I think I suggested it when we were in discussion last month that we, shall I say it? These are both the community learning centers and LSDMCs and the parent teacher association piece. Is that non-school organization policy?
Correct. That's what covers boosters, PTOs, alumni association.
I would, Mr. Chairman, I would really like us to be able to talk about all three of those at our August meeting, largely because I think the CLCs have been going through a rotation, and that policy is being affected and implemented because we've been hiring more resource coordinators. I think the LSDMCs are hitting their 50th year. And I know we've spent the last few years trying to beef that up. And I think the PTO piece, even from the last strategic plan, the one that ended this June, unless we extend aspects of it, emphasized that we wanted parent teacher or parent school associations in every school. And I think if we take all of those three in consideration and in collaboration with each other, I think emphasizing the community piece of our individual schools and district-wide and find ways to formalize the parent involvement, I think that would be useful at this time. The theme is, I think, back to basics and some of this other stuff. These are basic to CPS, but may not be perceived as being basic to other people.
That sounds so. I mean, our we could have homework. We take these three and then take them up at our next meeting and bring back any feedback. I think that makes sense. So, for Dr. Moffitt, Ms. Bolton, and myself, policy 9142, 9212, and 7500, we'll kind of deep dive on our own, and then we'll be back here in a few weeks, actually, to have a more robust discussion about them.
I also want to add, there is a policy, and I don't have it off the top of my mind, but there is a PTA policy specific that states that we're supposed to have PTOs in all the buildings.
That's the strategic plan.
That's
That was in the, I mean, and there may be something else. I'm not saying you're not, that was in the strategic. And I know it's not yet been accomplished. It looks like the CLC piece is being pretty well done. Of course, it's taken since 2009 or something to get that done. But
can we look at
I think
policy?
I think we should look that up and I think.
Well, no, there was another policy. Maybe I'm off. I thought that I read, and it's been about a year or so ago, that there was a specific PTO policy.
Did you find it?
Yeah, it's 9140.
All right, well, let's see that one.
Thank you.
Now add that one.
And I was just going to see if we could kind of talk about 9212 and 9140, because we were really in violation of that also.
Which one are we adding?
9140. I apologize that I didn't include it. I thought
all good.
Yeah.
Discussion was
Okay.
Yep.
And what do you want to add besides the 9140?
Just, I think 9140 and 9212 go together. Especially
Gotcha.
when you're talking about, and LSDMCs, like we're not doing any of those policies like
Fully.
they're written.
Right.
So I think that, and we haven't been, and I brought it up in another meeting, and they're like, oh, we've got 40 PTOs. So
I'm totally there with you.
We need to go back to what the policy
There's a history in every urban district of really avoiding as much as possible community engagement. It's a function. The suburbs don't go through that because the teachers and the communities run the place, regardless of who the principal is. I mean, that's just the way it is. But I think CPS has come a long way in 15 years. And we have to stop thinking about, public engagement as having a group of people be convened or surveyed, that we have structures that we're proud of that set us apart from other districts. And, principals resist it and other people resist it because but again, I think we've made progress, but I do think it's time to look at these again.
I agree.
And it doesn't mean change them. It means maybe enforce them.
I think that's what it is. I think it's awareness. It's about being aware. People don't realize that we have those policies, and the expectation from us is that they're followed. Yeah. And so when get it to happen.
And I think that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that's also part of the whole partnership concept in this district. We've been emphasizing that, especially the community learning center piece, dating back to the facilities master plan, which is like 20 years or so. And LSDMCs was part of the whole movement from, again, almost 50 years ago, where you were decentralizing and you were making sure that you had partnerships within each building. Mm-hmm. But urban districts are hard. So, parent involvement, it makes it even more difficult for folks. But in the long run, investing in the front side of that is going to make your school better. So
I agree.
I think it's great. I'm glad you add that about the PTOs.
Yeah, and I think my only comment is that, and I think what Dr. Moffitt is uncovered with this comment about 9140 is just an inconsistency with the strategic plan and policy, because the reason I said there was no PTO policy is because there's not. There's a parent involvement policy. In it, it doesn't even say that there should be a PTO in every school. It says there should be a parent organization or group in every school, which is not the same thing. Well, so you could have a school, but they're not. And that's, I'm agreeing with you. They're not. In the strategic plan, we're talking about organized student parent groups. A school could say that 3 parents got together and brought donuts in for students in a 6-month span of time. And quite literally, it abides by this little teeny policy. So I think it's either revising it, getting stronger with it, because what you uncovered again, I think, and there's a few times where this occurs, we've found it in here over the past few years where the strategic plan might be pretty direct and say this is what has to happen. The policy doesn't necessarily. So I think 9140 is an okay policy. We did it my first year on the board. I remember Ms. Bates was chair, and Ms. Bolton and I think we actually added that every school shall have at least one parent. But it's not the same thing. Again, it's not. Either way, thank you is the point. And I think we opened 9140, these other 3, and that could be the entire meeting next month, quite frankly. But
I think it should be.
It could be. Yeah, it could be. It should be.
Is that the only policy that speaks about parents? There is a student voice.
There's the huge one that Eve and I love about parents' involvement in federal programs.
Okay. Because I was going to say, probably, if we just took a month on engagement, we would be busy, because I know there's a student voice policy, there's a community engagement policy, but then there's also the PTA or PTO policy. But isn't there? I'm gonna look it up because I thought there was another.
Why don't let's do this? Let's put these 4 on our agenda for next month now. It will be an entire meeting, and let's chill for a second. Let's do these 4, and then if Dr. Moffitt, Ms. Bolton, or myself find another policy, or Mr. Hoying, find another policy, or Ms. Scott, that speaks to this issue, that's what we'll add to the agenda. Does that make sense? So like you go through like you're doing right now, Dr. Moffitt, you see something in the next
I'm a little anal that way.
No, it's good. It's good. But we're going to move, we'll move on from this, but like.
The whole 9000 series, is about community engagement.
Well, I mean, it's not like you're messing around on an auction site, like some former colleagues. Anyway,
right.
I can't
see.
Sometimes.
That's why they waited for us. So that I'm with the team of trouble. Okay, Eve
and I get unfairly marked that way.
No, you guys get fairly marked.
I might be fair, but
I'm proud of it.
I'm proud of it. All right, cool. So let's do that though. So our homework is we'll go through these, come up with something else.
Excuse me.
Pat, CC me or whatever, and we'll get it on the agenda.
Okay.
And I have the equity article to pass out to people.
Okay. And then if
Excuse me, Mike.
our one attendee would like to speak, we'll do that.
Good.
Pat's talking?
Chair Morowski, could you please clarify what 4 policies you were
Yes,
referring to, 90?
Yes, the policies that will be on next month's agenda are policy 7500, policy 9140, policy 9142, and policy 9212 right now. And then
Thank
if
you.
something comes up, yeah, well, thank you, Pat.
On the equity thing, we mentioned the equity policy is something because, again, background, when the treasurer brought it to our attention about she and the superintendent were working on trying to find sort of an equity list or an equity standard, and then I made the mistake of saying, well, equity means this to somebody and something else to somebody else. Rightfully so, Vice President Jones said, well, no, that's where we get in trouble because that's how we've delayed action over and over again. So I was pleased that she said that. So I do think we have to look at the equity policy and remind ourselves and remind our administration that you start with the policy, not necessarily what you've been researching and you yourself have learned with. If you want us to be a policy board, meaning keep our eyes on big issues, then you start with policy with us.
Yeah.
And looking back about how far back this went, it's an article from the publication that the Great City Schools puts out, and it's going back to 2016 or so. And the references in it, as we look at the board, I wish we could get back to our horseshoe instead of our panel discussion
I like
tables.
that configuration. That's nice.
It's what it's supposed to be instead of, calling on people like it's a panel discussion. It's a deliberative body. We're supposed to be talking to each other. Equity policy, the Great City Schools called this groundbreaking, that we are ensuring we will embrace the value of diversity in its operations, in the district's operation, while eliminating practices that perpetuate disproportionality or among students and schools. And as Mike pointed out last month, the idea that we're supposed to be getting annual reports and plans, and we've received one that I can remember. And so I just think that you start with the policy. If you're trying to figure out what equity is, we wrote a policy, and this is what it is. And this has to be, so it's historic. They said it's the quality of instruction, the quality of instructional program, equity and access to resources regarding the school system and the city of Cincinnati and urban children, which is another thing I am concerned about. I mean, in this whole movement in these last years, and as the person in charge of, I guess, history now that Melanie's gone, she appointed me, we were trying to do things that impacted positively our communities, as well as our schools. And that was the whole concept of the whole child. It's the concept of why we have school-based health centers. It's why we do this, that, and whatever. And so I just think that if we can save some part of the next couple of meetings or few meetings, Mr. Chair, to try to be a little bit more assertive about our equity policy.
You mentioned that.
Yeah.
We're supposed to get a monthly report. What is that?
Well,
an annual, I think it is. It's in the policy. It's in the policy.
we're supposed to get an annual report, and we're also supposed to annually approve a plan, which hasn't happened at least since I've been.
That's that last paragraph.
Since I've been on the board. The board directs superintendent treasurer together, which is important, to develop a plan, which has come up a lot, of course, in the budgeting with the equity lens. Clear and measurable accountability standards that can be assessed, reported, et cetera. Equity plan will be submitted annually to the board for approval, and its subsequent implementation by all departments and school sites will be reviewed by the board at least semi-annually, which again, hasn't happened since I've been here. So, huh? No. Not. I mean, we talk about equity. I'm not saying we're not doing equity. I'm just saying this specific thing is not. No, it's not happening since 2018. But we talk about it a lot. And the budgeting process. I'm not casting shade. Our budgeting process is different today than it was when I started, and we're talking a lot more about equity. But that does not happen. It hasn't since I've been.
No.
I know Jen brings up equity when she describes the budget presentation in the budget presentation. So, but I didn't know we were supposed to get a report.
And approve it.
Yeah,
every year. So, yeah, so it's something to, that I think this, committee, to Ms. Boland's point, can and should. Sort of reclaim, push back on a little bit. And, we're prepared to do that. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
I appreciate that, too. I didn't know that.
No.
I'm going to bring it up.
Uh-oh. I know to tell you. Any other business that is not on the agenda for today?
I think we should make a suggestion that we cut this horseshoe model.
Thank you.
Well, that's what it was when I got here. But we got separated with the old COVID.
Well, the COVID, yeah.
I do not miss sharing a desk with somebody. I'm not gonna lie. I'm all about that.
Well, yeah, you've got your meal there and everything.
I got like my
You
7.
do a lot of it.
You got your
going on.
got your refrigerator behind you. You could actually be in a van.
Yeah, I got
You could be in a van and drive it in to be at the loading dock.
Mobile. But I do think that we would just put you on the end. You'll be where Eve is.
On the end, yeah.
You'll be where Eve is.
You'll notice Eve was there for 10 years.
In that seat?
I was at the end for a real long time. I was a bad girl.
Yeah.
That's the bad girl. That's the bad girl seat.
That's the troubles. Well, then I think we should make the suggestion that's online. That whole one person should tune in to see if we make it happen.
I think so.
That's our new transportation director.
Well, hello.
Demetrius Martin, right on. Welcome, Demetrius Martin.
Hello.
His dad's name is Chauncey. I went to high school with him.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
wow,
cool.
neat.
Cool.
that must
Good
be
guy.
he's old.
Oh, wow.
Not in a bad way. No.
I'm old school. I'm old.
She went to school with my mom, so.
This is the
Right.
last call for any new things that have not been taken up. We have enough homework for next time, I think. I'm going to assume there's no hearing of the public because we don't have public.
I will say that I was going to wait until maybe September, October, and I still will. But there was an article in the Ohio School Board Association magazine that they sent out to us about forming a student board in your region, and so we could, I think we should do that. I think we should gather some student voice. This is not what the superintendent is proposing. This is separate. This is an actual student that comes to board meetings. So that's why I was asking about the
How
student.
large is that school district that's doing it?
It's in Ohio, and it's not just one district. It's like 4
Oh, yeah,
districts
there's several.
Yeah,
There's several.
that have come together to
Yeah.
each district representing a person. But it's a high school student. But anyway, I don't want to go into that because I'm not prepared. But I do want us to start looking at maybe establishing some sort of student voice component to the board, not what the superintendent is.
Dig it.
That's it.
Dig it. Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. Anything else? Ms.
I
Bolden?
have one question because our lawyer was very lawyerly in his response about is our transportation policy that we all did this year. To what degree we don't know what the new contract is with Metro. And I said, to what percentage are we kind of in agreement with that? And your good answer was, in your view, we are compliant with our new big transportation policy. I think we have 3 of them or so. We almost had 4. And if you could tell us, because I know we're supposed to be voting on the sort of Metro contract this coming Monday.
Yes.
How are we can you be more specific than we are compliant?
Yes.
Because I know we had those discussions that we were worried when we even brought that up last year when we rewrote it, because we were saying things like we're out of compliance or sort is out of compliance. How compliant are we with the transportation policies that we wrote last year?
Yes, so the Transportation Department is compiling that data, and Mr. Martin can correct me on Monday if this isn't correct. But of the students routed on Metro or who have proposed routes on Metro, he's advised that 42% of those students will have 0 transfers and 58% will have 1 transfer, that none will have more than 1 transfer. We're also looking into the other requirements of the policy or the compliance issues, including how far their stops are from their home, how far their stops are from school, how early they arrive to school, how late they would leave from school. So all those pieces are being looked at. I can't tell you how much of that data we would be able to present on Monday, but it's all being looked at.
Okay. And so we are going to be paying, but we are going to be in compliance with the law that
That's right.
says that our students aren't supposed to have, or charter students aren't supposed to have more than 1 transfer. We're saying neither will our CPS students.
Correct. That's of earlier this week data, and it represented 10,192 students routed. I believe exceeds even just our own students. So that would include.
And that's the number, is that the number of high school students? That's not necessarily going to be the ridership. This is usually not all of them ride the bus.
I'm going to have to ask him to clarify that, but I believe that's right. I believe that's the number of high schools. Yes.
Okay. Charter, private, parochial. And okay, cool. That's great. And if we can find out further, what are the 500 I saw in the superintendent's? No, in something we're passing a resolution in lieu of transportation. There's like 500 kids that are part of the in lieu of transportation.
I don't know the number, but that could be elementary as well. Who if there's a school that has a lower population of students who need transportation, then it's going to take a full bus, for example. We have the option of providing compensation in lieu of transportation. It's often more cost effective, and so we do this every year. This is not something that's new. When there's students that it's because of cost or other factors impractical to transport those students, law gives us the option of providing them compensation.
Okay, cool. That's all I want to know is the policy piece. And I think that we submit some questions prior to Monday night's meeting for the superintendent so that and transportation to answer those questions. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Good?
I'm good.
Good?
Good.
Everyone's good and happy. Thank you all so much. We'll see you Monday. Meeting adjourned.
Does Pat know all the stuff put in forward?